It all started one night at 3:14 a.m. with something that should have been nothing more than a flicker. You know the kind. The kind of flicker that makes you squint for a second and think maybe it's just a power surge or a faulty bulb. But when you've lived the kind of life I have, when you've seen the kind of things I've seen, you know better than to ignore the small stuff. So, I didn't panic, didn't jump out of bed. I just sat there in the darkness, watching the monitor, the cold coffee still steaming on the stove. The flickering light over my barn wasn't normal. It didn't flicker like a bulb. This was something else, something deliberate. And that's when I knew something was off. I wasn't dealing with a random issue. It wasn't just the light. It was a message. I watched the figures through the corner of my living room. 2 of them, moving along the outer fence line. Not quick, but not slow either. They moved with purpose, like they knew exactly what they were doing. Their steps were careful, calculated, as if they'd been trained to avoid detection, but they had no idea they'd already been caught. One of them had a limp, a subtle drag in his right leg. The other was scanning with a red-lensed flashlight, short sweeps, low beam. Not something a civilian would use, not a random person out for a walk. That's recon technique, textbook stuff. It's exactly the kind of thing I used to do, back when I was on the other side of the line. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just some random late-night wanderers. This was intentional. These guys knew what they were doing, and they thought they were invisible. But I wasn't the one they had to worry about being unseen. I didn't make a move right away. I just stayed still, watching, waiting. They didn't break into my property, didn't try the gate. They just kept walking along the fence line, like they were mapping it out, making sure everything was in place. Then one of them walked up to the well cap, stopped, and tapped it twice. Just a simple tap-tap. I know it sounds strange, but in that moment, I felt it. It wasn't random. It was a signal, a message. They didn't take anything, didn't touch a thing. They just left that little mark, and then they were gone. I stood there for a long time, just letting the silence settle in around me. And I knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I headed out to the barn to check things out. That's when I found it, nailed to the door, like a trophy or a warning. A black charm, carved bone, shaped into a skull with barbed wire etched through the jaw. Military hash marks down the side. Not the kind of thing you pick up at a gas station or a truck stop. This wasn't some prank. It was something deliberate. It wasn't just a marker. It was a statement. And as I knelt down to inspect it, I saw something else. Half buried in the gravel near the base of the door, boot prints. Big ones. Deeper than they should have been. They weren't local, the kind of boots you don't see every day. They weren't just trying to get in. They were leaving their mark. I traced the tracks back, tried to follow them, but they just vanished into the brush behind the hill. Whoever they were, they knew how to disappear. And that's when Karen showed up. 4 hours later, just waltzed up my private drive like she owned the place. No call, no warning, just marched up with her designer dog and that smile. You know the one. The smile that says everything's under control, that she's untouchable. She wore that pastel windbreaker like it was her battle armor. The kind of woman who thinks she can boss everyone around, because that's her world. And her poodle? Didn't bark, didn't sniff, didn't even stop to squat. Not a care in the world, just like Karen. She got to the end of my drive and stopped, looked me up and down like she was deciding if she could take me on. She smiled again, that fake, condescending smile. "Beautiful day," she said, like she wasn't standing a mile off her own property, trespassing on mine. I didn't say anything right away, just pointed out the obvious. "I'm just out here trying to get some fresh air," I said. I had to bite back the urge to tell her she was on my private land, but I didn't. Not yet. Then came the real reason she was there. Some of us on the board have noticed some equipment in violation of the HOA standards, she said, her voice dripping with fake politeness. Aesthetic violations, she added, like it was the most important thing in the world. I stared at her for a second before I pointed to the goat that had just taken a perfect dump on a rock. Aesthetic violations, I asked, and she stiffened, lips tightening like she was trying not to crack. I would hate for this to become confrontational, she said. I stared at her. You're already here, on my property, with a leash on my gravel, I said. It's already confrontational. She just shrugged, pretending like it wasn't a big deal. Some of us, she said again, just want to make sure we all cooperate, that's all. But there it was again. The same feeling. Karen didn't want cooperation. She wanted control. She wanted to push until someone broke. And she was trying to do that with me. But I wasn't going to be the one who bent. She turned on her heel, walked back down the driveway, still smiling. The whole time, her poodle didn't sniff once, didn't bark, didn't care. The second she was out of sight, I went inside. And there it was. The letter. Another standard HOA violation notice. Except this one wasn't standard. This one had a second page, a footer that read, Notice 1 of 3 before legal enforcement action. And it was signed by Karen Whitaker, of course, president of the HOA, and apparently, the acting director of security enforcement. I didn't remember voting her into that position, and I sure as hell didn't remember anyone asking if I wanted to be on the receiving end of her little vendetta. I stared at that letter for a long time. Then I pulled out something I hadn't touched in years. A box hidden under a false panel in my workshop. It wasn't just any box. It was the box. Inside were things I'd hoped I'd never need again. A sat phone, encrypted drives, and a toolkit made for situations that most people never hope to encounter. I wasn't about to go hunting just yet, but if they came back, I wasn't about to wait empty-handed. By the time I finished locking everything back in place, the light flickered again. Same barn door. But this time, it didn't just flicker once. It flickered and then died, completely. The power was out for 2 minutes, and the backup feed buzzed. Someone was on the trail again, and they were moving fast. I zoomed in on the feed. There he was, again, the man with the limp. But this time, something was different. He wasn't scanning. He wasn't looking for anything. He was staring straight at the camera, directly into it. No mask, no smile, just watching. And then he turned, slowly, and vanished back into the trees. The next morning, I found the sign, my no trespassing sign, reversed. Someone had flipped it carefully, quietly. They'd taken the time to make sure I saw it, but not hear it. It wasn't just intimidation. It was something more calculated. They wanted me to know that they were in control of the game now. The first thing I did was check the wires, reset the trail cams, and make sure everything was still intact. But it was more than that. I wasn't just fixing things. I was planning. I was mapping out my next move. Because Karen and her people, they didn't know who they were dealing with. They thought they could intimidate me, scare me into submission with their little games. But the truth was, they were playing with fire, and they didn't even know it. The letter was exactly what I expected. A standard HOA violation notice, nothing special. But there was something off about this one. You know how sometimes you get a letter and you can just feel something's wrong? This was one of those. The kind of letter that makes your blood run cold without any real reason. It was the second page that caught my attention. The footer, where it read, Notice 1 of 3 before legal enforcement action. 3 notices before legal action. Who did these people think they were? And then there was the kicker, the signature. Karen Whitaker, president of Simmons Valley Homeowners Association, Acting Director of Security Enforcement. Acting Director? I didn't remember electing anyone to that position, especially not her. I stared at that last line for a long time. There was no question in my mind now. This wasn't just about my land. This was personal. She had her claws in something bigger, something I wasn't ready to face yet. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, I knew I wasn't dealing with an ordinary HOA dispute. They weren't just trying to tell me what to do. They were trying to break me down. I needed to prepare. I wasn't about to let these people think they could walk all over me. Not when I had the tools to fight back. So that night, I went into the workshop and pulled out the old box. The box that I hadn't opened in years. It had been tucked away beneath a false panel, hidden behind 3 rusted tool bins, locked away like it was some relic from a past life. Inside, everything was there. The sat phone, the encrypted drives, the toolkit that could be used for things most people shouldn't even know about. I wasn't about to call the sheriff. I didn't want anyone involved yet. This was personal. If they came for me again, I wasn't going to wait for them to make the first move. I'd be ready. I spent the next few hours checking my perimeter, making sure everything was in place. If Karen or her little gang of bikers thought they were going to intimidate me, they had another thing coming. But then it happened again. The light flickered. Same light over the barn door. It flickered once, twice, and then it cut out completely. Clean. No reason. Just gone. Power went out for exactly 2 minutes, and then the backup feed buzzed to life. I knew what that meant. Someone was on my property again. I grabbed the monitor, zoomed in, and there he was, again, the man with the limp. This time, though, he wasn't just scanning the land. He wasn't looking for weak spots. No, this time he was staring right at the lens. Just standing there watching me. Not hiding, not sneaking around. Just watching. I don't know what he saw when he looked into the camera, but I knew he wasn't alone. And when he turned and disappeared into the trees, I knew something was wrong. This wasn't a game anymore. It was a warning. The next morning, I went outside to check my mailbox. As I walked up, I noticed something strange. My no trespassing sign was flipped. Not taken, not removed, just flipped. And it wasn't done in a way that said, "I'm marking my territory." No, it was done quietly, carefully, like they didn't want me to hear them, but wanted me to know they were there. It wasn't just a message, it was a declaration. They were watching me, and they were ready to make their move. That's when I realized what they were doing. They weren't just trying to scare me. They were testing me. They were trying to see how far they could push before I broke. But I wasn't about to break. Not now. Not ever. I wasn't the guy to be pushed around. I spent the next few hours checking every camera, every wire, resetting everything to make sure nothing was out of place. But deep down, I knew the real game had just begun. They were trying to get a rise out of me, trying to make me slip. But I wasn't the one who was going to slip. Not this time. And then came the bikers. The first time I saw them, they weren't making a scene. There were no roaring engines, no screeching tires. It was almost too calm. 6 matte black bikes rolled past my gate like they were in some sort of military formation. Quiet, smooth, precise. No music, no waving. Just 6 bikes cruising by at exactly 10:13 in the morning. They weren't speeding, but they weren't crawling either. They weren't there to visit. They weren't there to check out the scenery. They were there to survey. They rolled past like they were scanning barcodes on my land. They didn't even glance in my direction. They were efficient, cold, and calculating. I stood on my porch and watched them, not moving, not blinking. I didn't flinch. I didn't make a sound. And when they passed by, they didn't look back. They were too smooth for that. But then they came back. Same formation, same 6 bikes, just like before. But this time, one of them peeled off. Not aggressively, just enough to kiss the edge of my gravel driveway. His front tire nudged it just for a moment before he rolled back into formation with the others. He didn't look at the house, didn't nod, just left a mark. And I knew. They were marking their territory. They were letting me know they were here. And I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The next day I walked out to check the damage. My mailbox, bent at a 30-degree angle. Not crushed, not smashed, just bent. As if they'd taken just enough care to remind me they were here, without completely destroying anything. It wasn't vandalism. It wasn't about the mailbox. It was about sending a message. We were here, they were saying, and we chose not to knock. I went inside and checked the trail cams. They'd been offline but not damaged. One of them had its cord neatly detached. The other had its lens unscrewed and placed upside down on a fence post. This wasn't random. It wasn't carelessness. It was a message. A reminder that they were always watching. And this wasn't over. That night I found my goat lying dead just beyond the east fence line. No blood, no drag marks, just a broken neck and a leather strap tied tightly around her rear leg. The knot was something I recognized. It was a field binding, the kind you use to move livestock quickly and quietly. The kind of knot I learned how to tie in Kandahar when we needed to move without making a sound. This wasn't just a random attack. Someone had studied me. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. And that thought sent a chill down my spine. I wasn't dealing with some local thugs. This wasn't just Karen sending a few tough guys to intimidate me. This was bigger. And I knew I was in deeper than I had originally thought. The next few days felt like I was living in a constant state of alert. The sense that something was closing in, that the walls were getting tighter, never left me. The game had changed, and I knew it. They were no longer sending small threats, little things meant to rattle me. No, now they were sending messages that hit harder, cut deeper. The dead goat was only the beginning. They were testing me. They were watching me to see how far they could push before I cracked, before I became their prey. But I wasn't about to let them get that satisfaction. That night, I packed my bag. Not a casual overnight bag. No, this was the kind of bag you pack when you know you're about to step into a fight, and it could be your last. I didn't call the sheriff, didn't talk to anyone. I wasn't looking for permission. I knew exactly what I needed to do. The gear I pulled out was the kind of stuff you only touch when things go beyond normal. I grabbed a thermal scope, burner phones, encrypted drives, and the kind of weaponry that would make any sensible person question what they were getting themselves into. A suppressed Glock, 2 full magazines. I packed it tight, packed it silent. I wasn't looking to hunt anyone down. Not yet. But I wasn't about to sit around waiting for them to make the first move again. They'd been probing my land, testing my response time, watching me from the shadows. But I wasn't going to let them set the pace. By the time I got everything ready, it was already late. I left the house without a sound, without leaving a trace of where I was going. They thought they were the ones making moves, but I knew the terrain better than they did. I headed out to that bar where the bikers had been earlier, that place they used as their gathering ground. It wasn't marked on any map. It didn't have a name, just a dim, flickering neon sign hanging over the door. I parked a couple of lots away. It was too risky to get too close. But from here, I could see everything. I wasn't planning to make a scene. Not yet. I sat in the truck, watching the people coming and going, just waiting for something to happen. And then it did. At exactly 9:48 p.m., the bikes showed up. 6 of them. Same formation, same precision. The engines purred low, not loud, not threatening, just a soft hum as they rolled into the parking lot. I didn't see them stop. They just slid in like they were slipping under the radar. They had a mission, but I had mine. I wasn't just watching them. I was looking for something specific. And that's when I saw her, Karen. She wasn't sitting in the back, blending in with the crowd. No, she stepped outside. And when she did, it wasn't just a casual stroll. She was walking with purpose, like she had something important to say. She wore a hoodie with HOA Property Integrity Division printed on the front, a custom-made piece of apparel, like she was proud of her position. She looked like she was in charge, like she owned the place. I watched her from the truck, just observing, trying to make sense of what was going on. It was clear she wasn't just there to oversee. No, she was a part of it. She was running the show, and everyone else was just following her lead. I kept watching from the distance, trying not to make any moves that would give me away. It wasn't just Karen standing out there. She was laughing, clinking bottles with the others, pointing across a map someone had unrolled on top of a trash can. My land, my property. They were planning something, and I was starting to realize just how far they were willing to go. This wasn't about some minor HOA squabble. This was a game of intimidation, of power plays, and Karen was right in the middle of it all. But she wasn't the only one I recognized. One of the bikers walked into the bar. Jake McBride, ex-military, ex-human being as far as I was concerned. It had been years, but I knew that scar across his knuckles. I'd seen it before. It was the kind of scar you didn't get from a random street fight. No, this was a man who had seen things, been through things, and he wasn't just a ghost from my past. He was a reminder of a mission gone wrong, a reminder of a time when we both trusted each other, but trust only goes so far when bullets start flying. Jake didn't see me, but I saw him, and the minute I saw him, everything changed. I wasn't just dealing with Karen anymore. I was dealing with someone I had tried to forget. I didn't make my presence known. I stayed where I was, not moving, not showing myself. But I could feel the shift. The air was thick with tension, and I knew I had to make my move. As I watched Jake, I saw someone at the bar pause, just for a beat too long. His eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on my corner, I knew it was time to go. I wasn't about to let anyone make the connection. Not yet. I had to leave before they started putting pieces together. I started the truck, pulling out of the lot with nothing more than a quiet hum of the engine. I didn't want to make any noise. I didn't want to be noticed. But as I pulled away, I knew things were about to escalate. I headed back home, but it wasn't to rest. I couldn't rest. Not when I had Jake McBride back in my life. Not when Karen had her fingers so deeply embedded in this little war. When I got to the barn, it was as quiet as I expected. Nothing seemed out of place. But then I opened the door, and that's when I saw it. A crow, hanging upside down from one of the rafters. Its neck twisted, its eyes empty. Beneath it, a spent 7.62mm casing. Clean, deliberate. And on the stall door, 3 words carved into the wood. Still watching, soldier. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel fear. I just felt a deep, cold certainty. They weren't playing games anymore. They were sending a message, and they wanted me to know they weren't backing down. The next morning, I got the call. Karen's voice, sweet, almost sickly sweet. She was playing it cool, but there was a thin edge of frustration beneath her words. "Mr. Callahan," she said, "we noticed you didn't submit your Q2 property upkeep form." Her voice was dripping with condescension. "You think I'm playing forms with you right now?" I asked, cutting her off. I knew where this was headed. I could feel it. "I think you're agitated," she said, trying to sound innocent. "Maybe even unstable. You're arming contractors and trespassing. That's quite an accusation." I didn't blink. I wasn't about to play her game. Not now. I saw you at the bar with them, she said, trying to take control. I support local businesses, I shot back. It's important to build bridges. She was trying to make me the villain, trying to paint me as the dangerous one. But I wasn't having it. If you're feeling unsafe, Mr. Callahan, perhaps you're not a good fit for this neighborhood. Her voice was all sugar, but I could hear the threat beneath it. Say that again, I warned. Or perhaps you need a wellness check, she said, too sweetly. I'd be happy to recommend a licensed behavioral consultant. That was it, the final straw. It wasn't concern. It wasn't a call for help. It was a threat dressed up in velvet. But I wasn't afraid. I hung up on her before she could say another word. And as I stood there, I knew that Karen wasn't just an HOA president. She was something much worse. She wasn't playing by the rules, and now I was going to make sure she knew the rules had changed. I left the house, not looking back, knowing full well that things were about to get real. This wasn't just a neighborhood dispute anymore. This was a war, and I wasn't going to lose. Not to Karen, not to Jake, not to any of them. I knew it was only a matter of time before they came for me again. Karen's threats weren't idle. They were a prelude to something much bigger. She wasn't just some petty HOA president with a grudge. She was part of something darker, something organized. I had already seen it in the way they moved, the bikers, the way they coordinated everything so cleanly, so precisely. They weren't just out for intimidation. They were methodical, tactical. And Karen? She wasn't just the face of the HOA anymore. She was the puppet, and there was someone pulling the strings from behind the curtain. When I saw Jake McBride again, it confirmed everything I'd suspected. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a weapon, a ghost from my past, brought back for one purpose: to hunt me down. The truth hit me like a sledgehammer. I wasn't just dealing with an HOA dispute. This was an operation I had no intention of losing. The first night I went to that bar, I didn't make my move. I was biding my time, watching, waiting for something to slip. And it did. Jake McBride, sitting at the bar, pretending not to recognize me. It was a dangerous game they were playing, and I wasn't going to let them win. When I saw him, everything shifted. He wasn't just some random guy showing up to back up Karen's orders. No, Jake was part of the muscle. He was there to make sure things went Karen's way. But this wasn't just about muscle. It was about strategy. I could see it in his eyes, that familiar, calculated look that meant he was thinking 3 steps ahead. And that's when it hit me. The real reason they had sent him wasn't because they thought they could intimidate me, but because they thought they could control me. They were making their play, but I wasn't about to let them dictate the rules. It wasn't just about Karen or Jake anymore. It was about the power they thought they had over me. But I had my own power. I had the skills, the experience, and the will to fight back. I wasn't the kind of guy to back down. I'd been in situations far worse than this. I'd fought battles in deserts, jungles, and villages with no names. I knew how to survive, how to win when everyone else thought you were done. But now, this wasn't just about survival. It was about sending a message. Karen and Jake weren't going to get away with what they were trying to do. They thought they could break me, push me out, scare me into submission. But I wasn't going anywhere. Not without a fight. The next morning, I found the crow hanging from the rafters in the barn. A message. Clean, deliberate. A 7.62mm shell casing beneath it. The kind of shell casing that didn't just show up by accident. It was a signature. A warning. And on the stall door, 3 words. Still watching, soldier. It wasn't just about the message. They wanted me to know they were always watching. That they were always one step ahead. And maybe, just maybe, they thought that would break me. But it didn't. It only made me more determined. I wasn't going to be some pawn in their game. They had underestimated me, and now they were going to pay for it. Later that day, Karen called again. Sweet, saccharine voice, pretending like nothing had happened. Pretending like she hadn't sent bikers to stalk my property. Pretending like she hadn't just marked me as a target. "Mr. Callahan," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "We noticed you didn't submit your Q2 property upkeep form." I couldn't hold back a laugh. The gall of her, making it sound like I was the one causing trouble. "You think I'm playing forms with you right now?" I shot back. Her tone shifted, just a little, enough for me to hear the thinly veiled frustration underneath. "I think you're agitated, maybe even unstable. Arming contractors, trespassing. That's quite an accusation." I didn't flinch. "I saw you at the bar with them," she said, trying to add weight to her words. "I support local businesses," I replied, keeping it light, but the message was clear. This wasn't about business. This was about power, and she was trying to use it to control me. "If you're feeling unsafe, Mr. Callahan," she continued, her voice too sweet, "perhaps you're not a good fit for this neighborhood." That was it. The threat that had been lurking beneath all her words finally came to the surface. She wasn't asking me to leave. She was telling me. I didn't even let her finish the sentence. I hung up the phone, letting the silence settle in. I wasn't afraid of Karen, but I knew now that she was part of something much bigger. Someone else was pulling the strings. I didn't know who, but I knew they were out there, waiting, watching. And I was going to make sure they knew I wasn't going down without a fight. The following night, things escalated even further. I was sitting in my truck, parked just outside the bar again, when I saw them. 6 matte black bikes rolled into the lot, their engines purring low like a lion stalking its prey. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I just watched, waiting for them to make their move. They came in, exactly like the first time. Same smooth, calculated movements. But this time, they didn't just park. One of them, the same biker who'd peeled off last time, nudged the gravel again. Just a soft tap of the tire, just enough to leave his mark. Just enough to show me they were still there, still watching. The message was loud and clear. They weren't done yet, but I was. I wasn't going to wait for them to come to me again. I had set the trap. I'd been waiting for this moment. I wasn't just going to let them roll in and out of my life without consequences. I had a plan. I had set everything up, everything in place, waiting for them to make their move. And I was ready to turn the tables. They thought they were the ones running the show, but what they didn't realize was that I'd already rewrote the rules. They were walking right into the kind of trap I'd learned to set in places far more dangerous than this quiet valley. When the trap snapped shut, they wouldn't be expecting it. They were looking for a fight, but they weren't going to get the fight they thought they wanted. They were going to get something much worse. I had already outplayed them. The game wasn't over. It had just begun. And when it was all said and done, they would understand one thing. When you come for someone who's already been through hell, you're not just picking a fight, you're picking a war, and I wasn't about to lose.